From a leadership point of view, I think the difference is to build an element of trust with your staff. There's not a sort of them and us kind of vibe. So I think just as long as people really communicate, you do it really well. I have an open door policy in my office, which is sometimes not great to get work done, but you know, at least people have that sort of access to me. But often being the foreigner in the room, people don't want to tell me the bad news, you know, so they'd rather sort of ignore it until it is a message got out. So I think being able to be aware of not shouting at people in the office or anything else like that, you know, just sort of work out what the problem is and deal with the problem and make it a bit of a safe zone to work.
Hey, I really appreciate you tuning in today, and I'm always here to try to bring great value. And in today's podcast, I'm excited to introduce a true visionary leader who has made remarkable impact in Southeast Asia real estate market. David Jackson is the principal and CEO of Avison, Vietnam, and Cambodia, bringing years of leadership experience in one of the world's most dynamic and fast-growing markets. From his early years in UK to building and leading successful real estate ventures across Vietnam and Cambodia, David's journey is one of bold decisions, cultural adaptability, and relentless pursuit of growth. In this conversation, we dive into leadership lessons, the evolving real estate landscape in Southeast Asia, and how David continues to unlock the potential in his teams and in the markets he serves. Now let's get started. David, thanks for coming in and joining me today. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to talk about a few things, but before I get into that, what are you working on right now? Anything exciting? Anything you're really loving?
I think trying to work on everything at the moment. Opportunity at the moment is quite difficult. The market's quite difficult. So just chasing a few things down. I am working on one amazing thing that's a bit out of our core activities. We're pivoting a little bit. And hopefully if that comes off, that'd be very good.
Yeah, that's cool.
So that's with our parent company, Avison as well. We're working in partnership with them on a project.
Yeah, that's cool.
It should be really good.
It's always fun to have something that you're looking forward to.
Yeah, I think, it's been a couple, difficult years.
Very.
COVID, obviously that sort of elongated to a lot longer than most people expected. A global pandemic is pretty difficult to deal with in the budget sheets. And then afterwards, we've been in Vietnam, we've had sort of elongated elections as well.
Yes.
And now we've got the efficiencies going on in the government. So real estate, I think will be in a positive place, but at the moment it's just in a transitional time. So yeah.
It's been stuck for a little while. In fact, when it really started to freeze here in Vietnam, you can see it directly on my own P&L, exactly when that really took effect, and we're still trying to dig out of it.
Yeah, I think it's you just look at people, investors' confidence is down. Generally around the world, all the sort of last year was a mega election year, and everyone's in change mode.
Yeah, that's right.
And so I think it takes a while. You can see the stocks and shares are getting better as people get more confidence, and normally real estate follows a little bit after that.
No.
Maybe 6 months after that, as other things go on.
Yeah.
So.
Now, I know you're a busy guy, and I know you have a lot of different things, but in general, what are you doing there at Avison?
So I'm the CEO and principal, which basically is the person that runs the company. The buck stops with me.
And liable and all those things.
Hopefully not too large.
Yes, exactly.
But and we're a sort of international real estate consulting firm. So Avison Young are headquartered in Canada. And it's in about 21 countries around the world and expanding in its expansion phase. And I run the operations here. Here we've got a lot of business lines. I think we've got 15 business lines in total, 11 that are client facing, and then, 4 at the back office from that. And we basically do pretty much everything from identification of, land for people to buy. We help people buy the land. We help people manage to what to build on the land, highest and best use, we often call it. Put the design teams together, manage the build of it, then, do the handover, property management, leasing, sales, and then, the end divestment. So we do the whole process, but the long and short of it is I work with Asian organizations and the government here and bring in the foreign money and connect the two together. That's the main gist of it.
There's a lot of aspects to real estate other than just buying and selling some land or a building.
Yeah.
And you guys pretty much have your hand in almost every aspect of that here.
In fact, I think we do more than most other firms because we also do mortgage valuations for banks as well, which are, a little bit tricky. You have 24, 48 hours to go and value a property that,
like an appraisal process, in a sense?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, for the banks. We often work with banks on that.
All right. Vietnam still lacks a lot of things that, what we're used to in U.S. or in UK on how, properly to do real estate. It's still kind of the wild, wild west here in a sense. And,
I mean, it's a little bit like that, but, I think, real estate, I'm a fellow of the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors. I've got a degree in surveying, as well as a few other qualifications as well. So I think there is a process to follow. If you start cutting the corners on that, or your client starts cutting the corners on that, that's when the problems start. Yeah. But there is a form and function to it. Often in practice, sometimes it doesn't work out that way, but there's often a good structure to it.
Now, is it pretty recent that you expanded into Cambodia, or has that been there for a while?
Yes and no. Like everything in Asia, it's not as straightforward as what it seems. We basically moved brands. We were almost coming up to 20 years for the brand here in another international brand, and we changed to Avison Young because they are a privately owned company. They want to utilize us to expand into the region and help them do that. The previous organization, I think it was a bit risky for them to be in markets like this. They're publicly listed on the stock exchange. So we're helping them grow. We did have a company set up there, and then COVID happened. So that got put on hold, and then basically it was 1 year, almost just over 1 year with the new brand and focusing on that and obviously the core market here in Vietnam. And then after that, moving out into Cambodia. And then once that's settled in, who knows where next,
What's one of the biggest differences between leading people in Vietnam versus leading people in Cambodia?
I think culturally there's huge differences. Employment of staff, there's huge cost differences. It's quite expensive to employ staff in Cambodia. You think the paperwork's difficult over here in Vietnam. Cambodia, it's a little bit more tricky as well. At the moment, we're still sort of growing up, so it's a very sort of small unit over there. We are utilizing the economies of scale of having our Vietnamese business that's like a machine over here and applying it the same way. So it's basically, from a leadership point of view, I think the difference is to build an element of trust with your staff and build a good teamwork together so that, the team dynamics are good and people work in unison with each other. There's not a sort of them and us kind of vibe.
Exactly.
And I think nowadays with communication is quite, a lot easier than maybe back in the day. So I think just as long as people really communicate, you do it really well. We have lots of town halls, we have lunch and learns, we have other things where staff can keep learning and trying to communicate. Communication is king, along with cash flow.
For sure.
Yeah.
Cash flow is super important. When you are dealing with 15 business units or whatever in Vietnam plus Cambodia, how do you yourself find the ability to focus on something? Do you have any tricks on focusing?
That's a very, that's a difficult question. I think the problem is that a lot of the business is quite diverse. And so you have to make sure that you're, I'm obsessional about meeting minutes with people. I want to know bullet points as to what we're doing before we go in there. I'm pushing into AI quite a bit. I do a lot of research before we go into a meeting about who the company is, what they need, and ask the right questions. I think always asking questions of your staff and the client to know really what the problem is. Often it's not as simple as what it might seem, the problem. And so just by constant asking and probing and trying to get to the real truth of the matter, I think is one of the keys. Focus wise, it's not easy. I think when you're in a meeting, but you're worried about other parts of the business that maybe you can't discuss with other people, whether it be cash flow or how to make payments or whatever it might be. There's only a certain group of people you can share that information with. So, I go to the gym a lot. I do boxing, take a bit of stress out in that way. And I think that's helped me a little bit.
Yeah, that's important. I feel that focusing is getting harder and harder,
Yep.
as we progress with the information technology, where everything's coming at us. We have almost too much information in a way. And, the reason I asked that question, because I feel that struggle also, and that trying to understand. And so again, practicality of somebody that's juggling things like you are, that's it's no easy task.
Look, I think being a leader, is really difficult this time. You have technology changing so quickly, and if you're not on top of it, from a management point of view, I could be giving a task to someone that maybe back in the day would take 2 weeks. Now it takes 2 minutes.
Yes.
And if you're not up to speed on what that is, I mean, basically your staff are going to have very little respect for you pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's definitely, from a management point of view, I'm a big fan of Ray Kroc, McDonald's, grinding it out, just turning up every day, grinding it out, being there, showing up, turning up, understanding what people's issues might be.
Mm-hmm.
I have an open door policy in my office, which is sometimes not great to get work done, but at least people have that sort of access to me. If I don't know what the problem is, I can't fix it, and then the stress builds up. And that there's often being the foreigner in the room, people don't want to tell me the bad news. So
I know that
they'd rather sort of ignore it until it is a massive problem.
That's right.
So I think being able to save face, be aware of not shouting at people in the office or anything else like that, just sort of work out what the problem is and deal with the problem, make it a bit of a safe zone to work.
I heard you earlier talk about, looking for the customer's problem and, researching and in sales or, in pitching for service or in selling product. How important is it to understand the client's problem?
It's essential. I mean, that's the. I guess the first thing to do when you're seeing a client is maybe not to impress what the company is doing on your beliefs on what the client wants. So often I see people moving around nowadays. The pitch deck. Before, the sales pitch deck used to be, your company, you'd go through that first, how many employees, how many everything. Now that's at the back of the slides, Really, it's about who's going to be on the project, how's that individual going to help you, what's their experience, and how they're going to fix the problem that you might have. So I think that's definitely changed quite a bit. People put the client mostly before what the pitch might be. I think there's a few inherent issues with sales globally, but also in Asia. Personally, I love sales. I know lots of people call it a dirty word. They want to be, a leasing executive, or they want to do something else. But everyone's in sales, from what they wear to how they present themselves, to their LinkedIn profile, to what books or speaking they might want to do. So I think if you're not in sales, there's an issue, because I think everyone deep down is in sales.
Every lawyer, it doesn't matter what your job is. There's some way you're either selling a product, or you're selling your opinion, or you're selling your ability to do something to somebody. It's very important.
Yeah, so I personally quite like sales. But that said, in Vietnam is a little bit different. I have staff that, Vietnam 60% is under 35. Mm-hmm. There's a hierarchy and ranking of age and, how people communicate to each other. Yeah. Often, if you're trying to get a sales agent to call a CEO up at a company, things get a bit sort of strange. They want to have a good, ranking of who to talk to and how they do that. And I think a lot of people are frightened to ask for business. Me, not so much, but
I think that's a problem with a lot of salespeople. It's the fear of rejection.
yeah,
Everybody's really scared to get rejected. And, you're similar age to me where we grew up with, you had to go ask a girl out and she'd tell you no to your face. It wasn't like digitally how they do it now, but, we had the ability to build some resilience from that. And
but in my case, lots of resilience.
I think a lot of people now haven't had that, face to face, and then take the time to say, oh, wow, what did I do wrong? What did I say wrong? Did I look not the part, and fix it and try again, and then reject it and try again and be rejected. So I think it's hard building resilience now.
I think it's, I was talking to someone about this about the state of brands and companies and organizations. Obviously, back in the sort of Roman days, if you wanted a good wine, you would ask your friend, who's selling a good wine down the market, and then go down and negotiate, and it's by word of mouth. And then all of a sudden, corporations take over. Coca-Cola's telling you they're the best. Pepsi's also telling you the best. Believe in the brand. I think nowadays it's back to bespoke sales. So it's not just a case of pitching the brand or the organization first. It's about the level of who's going to be on the project and what they're doing and how they're going to deliver. So we're very careful about constant learning, making sure people are trained on ways to look at business, ways to make sure they're up to speed on the knowledge, because otherwise, why would you hire a consulting company?
Yeah, that's right.
I would say one of the things that's been very useful for me personally is things like disc profiling. Understanding. Professor Marsden did a great job of behavioral assessment of people and how they work and how they operate and in teams. And if you know your weaknesses or your personality type, then basically you can try and plug those holes maybe.
Yeah.
So disc profiling is something that I'm very when in meetings, and understanding where people fit and their behaviors and what's their decision making capabilities. Is very.
I mean, personalities for sales is definitely different than someone who works in accounting department. And understanding that's really smart.
Yeah. So I get I'm a high I, high D, high S and low C. But if that means anything to anyone listening, but basically high I means that I'm a people person, right? So as a result, it's quite difficult for me to let people go or because I feel like I've let them down.
Yeah.
So if you're a really dominant person, maybe you're not doing the paperwork properly. You're just go and so I think knowing your leadership style, that's been very helpful for me. Yeah.
How did you get to Vietnam?
How did I get to Vietnam? There's a long and short story, but ultimately, I met a lady in Freshers Week at university, who was a lot braver, cleverer, and smarter than I am, and she went backpacking before it was backpacking. When we finished, I kept getting these postcards and Hotmail. I think it was back then.
Yeah.
And it sounded like a pretty good adventure. I don't think, in my country at that time, which was sort of 25, 26 years ago, people were coming out. Maybe they'll go to Spain, or maybe they'll go to France or something like that. But they certainly wouldn't be out this way. And so followed over here. Vietnam was the first country I came to via Thailand. Everyone had to go via Thailand, but pretty much and I love the people. I love the vibrancy. I love the food. And so I think once you've done that move once, you've experienced living abroad, I think it's not as dangerous or not as tricky as what it could be. Cool. And so you build up confidence, and give or take a few jobs in between. I've had quite an eclectic career. I decided that I wanted to move abroad, and this was always in my mind.
Yeah, that's really cool. Experiences are so much more valuable than possessions at the end of the day. And, having the guts and courage to just uproot and move to somewhere brand new where you don't know the language and it's 100% different.
Yeah.
That's
I remember talking to my dad, and he thought, he said, I'd been working in hospitality at the time. I was building up a gastropub sort of business chain. and didn't have a break for 5 years. And when I told him my plans to sell it all, break up with a girlfriend and move to Vietnam, he said to me, "You don't speak Vietnamese?" And I'm, no. Do you know anyone over there? No. Are you having a breakdown? But I think things worked out, well for me. And Vietnam has certainly been interesting and also hugely enjoyable.
Oh, no. Yeah.
And now this is my 18th year here. Yeah, it's been an adventure.
Yeah. I thought I'd stay here 1 year, and now I'm almost 10. So
well, I have
to do that.
I have to say, I did for the first 2 years, live out of a bag just in case things didn't work out. So I think it takes a while to get used to things.
Yeah, no doubt. Has there been a time in your life where you really had a real setback and you got through that? And, what did you learn from that?
Yeah, I mean, it would be very nice if I could say that I didn't have a setback. Actually, I was very, unfortunately, I was very ill in my early 20s. And I was in and out of hospital for a couple of years, which what they thought might be... I had issues with my throat and other things like that, and it kind of fell in between. Basically, I thought it was cancer. So a lot of treatment, going through and bits cut away. And I think at the time, I remember thinking, this isn't right. I just finished university.
Yeah,
I was just like, this is, you go into I couldn't physically do the job that I was doing anymore, and I couldn't physically keep up with things, and you hit into depression. So I think there's moments where you look back on it, but I think the mind is something that you've got to really look after. As I get older, having a good mindset on it, having good friends around that are supportive, good support network, I think helps. So yeah, pretty dark time, but at that same time I couldn't go out, I couldn't do what I wanted to do, so I picked up the guitar, and it's now something I really love.
Yeah.
I'm not very good at it, but I think through problems there's always something that might come out of that eventually.
Oh yeah. There's no doubt. I like the fact that when we're in the problem, it's so big. It's such a, but when you overcome it, then it becomes such a positive thing for us. Like we did that, had that problem, overcame it, and then that builds the resiliency and the ability to take on something maybe bigger next.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe I think you've got 5 things. Your health is obviously massively important. It's number one, right? So health, family, in no particular order, family, friends, job, money, let's say. Right now, if 2 of those aren't working properly, you can still manage things. But when you start losing a bit more of that, then you've got to reassess things and kind of work out what's going on.
So. Yeah, I remember a long time ago, Zig Ziglar had like this wagon wheel with those points.
Right.
If you were, you were at a 2 at one and a 5 at another, this is going to be a lumpy road.
Yeah,
for you. So
yeah,
it is hard to find some harmony in there.
And I think also, especially with work, even things like now, working through problems with an uncertain future is difficult. You're got to have a positive mindset in front of people. You can't be, putting your hands over your face in the office and think that people aren't going to notice. I think you've got to deal with it, make sure that it's done in a way that people have confidence that you're the guy to make the decision, even though things, might be a bit more drastic than what people believe.
I do my best to teach my team that, even if you don't feel like it's great, you better put on the act. I mean, you have to be an actor today. You better act the part, because your attitude is contagious. If the leader is down in the dirt, everybody's down in the dirt. And it really is really true.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Has there been a time where, I'm sure there has, that you were pretty surprised with your leadership ability?
Surprised.
you look back as a young guy and and you're leading your first team, and you're learning and leading.
Yeah, yes and no. I think it's not something, you wake up and all of a sudden you're managing a company of 100, right? You kind of, there are things you learn along the way, and I'm honestly, I'm still learning. If you have an open mind, it's a lot better. So, I think there's things I'm good at and there's things I'm not particularly good at. And then if you know that, you can kind of put a good team around you to solve that. You're only as good as the parts that are around you.
Gotcha.
There's no one person overnight success, that's for sure.
No.
So I think I can flash back to, I do a lot of, like yourself, I do a lot of public speaking. Sometimes thousands of people. And I think you build up to it after a while. I remember sort of being very nervous beforehand. Nobody wants to sort of get out there, and now actually I quite enjoy it. If I'm really honest with you. So I think there's certain things that I really like in leadership, and there's certain things that I'm not particularly. Checking half Vietnamese to English documents is not my, but negotiating a good contract, no problem. But yeah.
When you say, the leader, it's really the people he puts around himself or herself. What are some of the things you really look for somebody when you're looking to hire them?
So actually, really, honestly, I know there's a whole sort of Maslow hierarchy of needs and things like that, or people that are good, in terms of what to hire. And there's loads of books about the right person to hire and what might be good. I think there's a weird thing, isn't there, right? So if you're in sales and you're good at something where you're closing deals or you're making sure things happen, then all of a sudden you get promoted up to your level of perceived incompetence, which is the Peter principle, it's called. But all of a sudden, just because you're good at deals doesn't mean you might be good at running a company, right? So you get to a stage where people go, okay, I'm not sure. But I guess people have confidence on you, or you fix a problem and you work through it. What I look for in people is not necessarily, they need to have, compliance legally wise. They have to, all of our brokers are qualified, right? You can't have that going on. So there's legal and compliance stuff on the right people to hire. But really what I'm after is someone that has got a good head and a good heart. And what I mean by that is they're a smart person and they have passion about what they want to do and continued learning. If they don't have other than those, there are skill sets in business you can work with people on. But unless you've got those, a good head and a good heart, it's not going to happen. And there's no point training people over and over again if they, if they're complacent about whatever they need to do.
You're speaking the truth there.
Yeah, so
big time.
There are times, I'm working with people and I'm bringing deals in and I'm passing to them, to the staff, to close up the deal. And they're going to make a lot of money from it. And the level, it's like I'm pulling them through quicksand. And you're like, I don't understand this, But that's, I think people have their good and bad times.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, good head and good heart. Equally a good character, because I think, your character defines your behavior, which goes on to define other stuff. So if they've got a good character, I guess that's probably what's important.
I'm sure you're growing up your upper leaders probably are people that you've grown up into the business rather than bringing in somebody from outside. Is that the case?
So I've got a number of companies. One of them is an insurance company that I also have as well. But it's focused on expats and foreigners and bringing in, and that's a whole different set of things to look at and discuss. In the real estate, basically, we're operating in Vietnam. We want to make sure that we are focused on growing from within, making sure that people are happy, and they're the best people for it. Because I think if you're a foreigner in the industry, it's quite specialized. If it's going to take you 2 years to work out, there are people who work here 18 years. They're still trying to work out decree law or HR law, or Which companies are important, which are not, which are working, which have got good status. I think working in Asia as a consultant, a lot of the time, what's good on paper might actually not be that great on paper. You might have all these amazing statistics of this lovely client, perfect client, but actually they might just not pay your bill. When you work it all through the end of the day. So I think by having someone foreign, unless they got a very strong skill set and background, we'll probably hire and develop from within and their skill set.
Mm-hmm. Your insurance company specializing in expats, foreigners, medical insurance.
Yep.
That's got to be like the number one or number two thing people are worried about most when they come here. Is the medical good enough, or the quality of medical? Well, what's something that people really should understand about medical insurance for the family or something if they move to Vietnam?
Yeah, well, first off, I have people that work for me on investment. I'm just in insurance and finance advisory. So on that company, I leave that up to the specialized guys. We've got a great guy called Quinn Miller, another guy called Shane Dillon, that work on that, plus a whole load of team that are focused on expats. Mm-hmm. I think, again, working out what the person's needs might be. Everybody wants insurance when they don't have it, and something goes wrong, right? So I think, really we're there to make sure. I think there's a lot of people in sales that are selling a product out there, no comments about any company, and they know that they might get a good commission for that, but actually the reality is that they won't pay out. Mm. And I think so when people have, worked with the team that I have in that work for me, I think the number one thing I said to them is that I don't want people coming up to me about bad service or standards. So that's a massive KPI. We've got loads of stuff there. And the team, it sounds crazy that a core business might be to go over and above and treat your client or your customer with a good service. But honestly, it's a market differentiator for us. The amount of people that you sign up for an insurance, they'll call you 2 days up before the renewal and say, "Hey, do you want to do this again?" That's not how we operate.
Yeah.
It's a weird thing that actually by providing good service and standards, and that's
for sure
the differentiator.
You've been here over 20 years. What's one piece of advice you'd give a new country manager that just showed up here in Vietnam, moved here from maybe the Western world? What would you tell them they need to look out for?
What do they need to look at? Well, pretty much everything. But what I would say is, I've spoken to people before. Sometimes Asia is a good place for people to come and operate, and sometimes it might be an escape and it's not good for them. And so I think before you come over here, there's no secrets in Vietnam, I'd say, or in Asia. People know your payroll. People know how what's going on. So I think just being either very open and transparent about who you are and what you are, or but don't think that people don't know or don't gossip about you. Be very careful about that.
Oh yeah.
And that's good and bad both ways. I think I'm not saying always be cautious and on point. I'm certainly not. But yeah, don't think that. For my staff, we're in sales, we're in residential. It's a risky business. There's lots of cash involved sometimes. If you think that, somebody's not going to find out if you're taking money, well, you shouldn't be, the truth will come out eventually.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, always.
Yeah, I feel this. People they'll snitch on you here pretty quick if you're doing something really bad. Maybe if you're not totally a bad person, they'll keep it to themselves. But sure, once you cross that line, then for sure you're going to get snitched on.
Yeah, so for me, I spent a long time doing my various degrees and getting qualified, and I'm chairman of the assessor panelist. The last thing I want to have is any impropriety, and that's the last that the Avison Young would want as well. I mean, ultimately they're super compliant. If they weren't, I met them a lot of times in London. We discussed, our company cultures together and what worked and what didn't work. And they saw a real alignment in the way that we behave. We have a very open, planned office. we're transparent with the staff and where we're at with things, and people know the good and the bad. So I think that's highly important. Knowing that your reputation is
for sure. What's one thing you really consider before you're going to make a big decision on something?
One thing I really consider in a big decision in life or
in business in general.
Well, a lot of times I think it depends on the situation. What I would say is that I think you weigh up the pros and cons of what it's going to do, how distracting it is. For example, making a decision to move into another country, Cambodia, that's a big decision. Is my time going to get utilized over there where the financial return on investment might not be as good as what it might be in Vietnam in the next couple of years? So do you distract away from your core business or not? Do you focus on whatever that might be? I think you can, as a leader, when you have multiple business lines going on, it's easy to get distracted and spend your time spinning in circles over something that generally might not be important. It's all important. Don't get me wrong. It's all important. You have to, the devil's in the detail, and you work through the issues. Small incremental changes every day have, bigger results, exponential results at the end of the day. But there's a lot of things that you can get time sucked into here, or a client or something that just really, having that time to do a no-go or go analysis on the project might be more useful than just trying to get everything and go into everything.
Yeah. You're playing guitar. Are you doing that when you feel overwhelmed with something and you want to refocus? Is that your outlet?
No, that was something where when I was ill in my 20s, I think it was always something that I wanted to do. It's certainly not my focus. In fact, I'm very bad at guitar. But and I think also one of the things that I have realized with stress and a good work-life balance or separate, I'm not saying I've got that either, but is that I think if you want to be creative in your life, you have to have a good mindset. If you want to paint, it's not because it might be because you're stressed, but to me, I'd like to enjoy it and kind of, take the time. So actually, I think during stressful situations, you tend to do less of that, and you tend to do more unhealthy things, or that's in my case. So, not, skipping the gym day or something like that if you're straight. Now, I think that's a slippery slope. I'm trying to, but, I put on a few pounds this year.
Well, everybody. You gain a couple every time you have a...
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. So
it is pretty hard to keep it going. What's one thing you learned that helped you become a more effective leader?
Well, I have to say I'm a fairly obsessional reader about business books and now about books to do with mental health and wellness and things like that. So on all podcasts, or I do the whole lot. So I think there's good strategies out there. There's some really smart people out there. I think the books that are out at the moment, are better than they were 20, 30 years ago. They're a lot more well written and a lot more focused. I mean, talking about mental health or men's mental health in particular, I think that, nobody would talk about that a few years ago. Now, blah. And so I think reading a lot of business books help. I think, understanding who you are really helps in terms of leadership. I think, for me, Peter Drucker, him saying without measurement, there can be no management. I think that's a key. Understanding where the numbers are. I in my previous incarnations in work, I used to work for Citibank for a number of years. I dealt in gold bullion and bearer bonds, the administration of that. And then, after Nick Leeson stole a load of money in the banks, they put together an internal audit, that I was part of their group for around Europe. Later on, ill, then went into pharmaceutical sales to manage my time, and then after that went into sort of hospitality and other stuff. So for me, where I'm at the moment in terms of leadership and how you get there, I have a biology degree, which means I understand about, green buildings and construction and all that kind of stuff. I have a surveying, so I understand about real estate. Banking, working for them. I think Citibank was the largest employer at the time, so I know what it's like to work for a large organization. I know my way around a balance sheet and profit loss account. I understand how to manage different parts of a business and how they interact together. Then, you're into pharmaceutical sales, train on sales, how to close, what to do there, hospitality, people, buildings, management, leases, and things like that. So, yeah, it's been a sort of, it might seem like there's no rhyme or reason in it, but actually each one led to something else, to what I do today, is a really good mix. I think it's a very good mix of knowing about finance or knowing about, these different kind of aspects of work.
Yeah. Have you done a Clifton Strengths assessment?
I have not, no.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would guess that in your top 5 is learner. I would think that, the deep down, you want to learn more things. I find that the people that are really actively trying to make themselves better are the ones that, continue to succeed. And I've watched you, and I see that in you, like, oh, okay, for sure he's, trying to find a way to get better.
I will scribble that down afterwards.
I know the Clifton Strengths, it's good. It shows your weaknesses and your strengths, but, it really tells you to focus on your strengths. Don't waste your time on being on your weaknesses too much.
I did go a bit of a rabbit hole the other day on ChatGTP, where it's going through loads of stuff, and I'm asking, I never get this word right, ikigai. There's an ikigai. You can go into it and ask you questions about your purpose, your meaning of life, and kind of some other stuff. And what you should focus on.
When you're evaluating your team, a specific person on your team, and you see maybe they have more potential than they know it. You see them as somebody that they don't see as themselves.
Yes.
How do you help them realize they have more potential than they have, than they think they have?
Yeah, I think, a lot of it is mentoring one-on-one. I think when you look at how people learn, a lot of it is on the job training rather than, externally or through exams process or everything else like that. So I think it's sitting down with them, being a mentor. I'm a mentor to quite a few people, with the RICS, with SIOR, another one, and I consult on business as well. I think mentoring for sure. Going through that process. I think for me, I think you can see the talent in people quite quickly if you're in the industry that you're in, right? So to me, the problem is those people that think they've got loads of potential but actually don't have potential. They're the worst. They become like a sort of they can be very disruptive in the company. I mean, you try telling somebody in sales that they're not actually that great at sales. Your sales mindset is that I'm the best, about what I want to be. And so I think they're the more difficult one. The other one that I see quite a lot is, team dynamics and the way that works. There's a lot of people that are maybe running a department or a team, and they make their commissions and targets, but really they're utilizing the work of other people to get that. We call it like a rider, on the way that they pay, or their scheme that they pay, and there's a delusion of grandeur there that they might be good. So I think really what I would look at is not your sort of amazing superheroes that do well in 1 year but are quite volatile.
Yeah.
Team dynamics. Simon Sinek in his book Leaders Eat Last, he talks about the sort of armed forces and how they work together. They don't want the sort of super warrior that's going to put everyone in trouble. They want loyalty and respect and communication and trust, and all these other sort of parts of somebody's personality. So I think it's looking at how that functions and pairing people off on and talking to them about why, it might be a good fit if they tried this or pushed themselves out of the comfort zone. Like, I think with everything, some people teach or learn at different pace than other people. And so also knowing, that you're not, as a leader, you're not projecting onto them what you think that you would want them to do. You know, I guess a parent's probably the same thing with the children,
sure.
but, you know, just being aware that you're kind of working with them and what their needs might be. You know, they might not necessarily want to be a CEO, you know, or whatever. So,
who in your past really unlocked your potential?
Unlocked my potential. You know, I think at different points in my career or in my life, different people helped out for different reasons. You know, the first one, obviously, my parents, right? I mean, you know, they worked really hard. They put me in schools where I was going to be a lawyer, doctor, solicitor, banker. You know, I mean, they made sure that I was educated, and I think that doesn't matter where you move in life, or that stays with you. I mean, they were selfless in that, really. You know, at I'm sure lots of cost to them. So, you know, and then I think as you have your first job, you know, I remember, I think I was my first proper adult job. You know, somebody asked me to take meeting minutes. You know, and I forgot my notebook, so I was trying to take it on my hands. You know, as embarrassing as that sounds now, like I'd be horrified, you know, but you know, the guy sort of said, all right, like, everyone stop the meeting, let's call this guy aside. So, you know, I think somebody like making sure that you feel comfortable and working with you, but there's many people. You know, my business partner, Peter Dinning, at the time now, you know, we've been working together for 17 years. You know, there's a lot of patience in 17 years, you know, and, you know, so, and communication and trust and all the else. So I think there's many people, you know, along the way that being kind. There's some others that have also not been kind, and they've also shaped me in different ways, you know.
For sure. I mean, I have this analogy where people talk about you know, I saw in an article that bad bosses, and all these people were talking about their bad boss in this article. And then, of course, I thought, about my bad boss. And after a while, I started thinking about it. So wait a minute, that's the guy that cared about me. Yeah. He pushed me. He cared about me. My bad boss was actually the one that just let me slide.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I think it's very different. Also, I think when you're, or in my case anyway, you know, you work for these, managing upwards is very different than managing downwards sometimes. I mean, you know, everyone's got to pay the piper, so to speak. But I think, you know, when you're younger, you just see your role, your issues with it, your problem with it, you know, and also there's a massive rise, you know, in narcissistic tendencies and behavior in people nowadays. So they only see what is right in front of them. Yeah. You know, they might not see the bigger picture or what's, you know, because they don't need to, you know, they don't need to know what the plan is 3 years down the line. You know, so I think as you get older, you kind of are a bit more aware of that, and the people that are kind of giving you maybe a bit of tough love or a bit of direction, you know, are ones to kind of grumble about, but, you know, it's quite helpful.
That's right.
Hopefully I'm not one of them, though, you know.
If your boss doesn't ever talk to you about anything, it's probably not a good sign. You know, if your boss is actually getting on you about something, that's actually pretty funny.
Yeah, you know, I have to say, when sort of, you know, there is a problem and sort of, you know, I'm on the case with them, you know, it tends to get solved pretty quickly, because then they want me to move on to something.
Yeah.
You know, they don't want me, you know, to be, you know, eyes on the case.
Yeah. How do you see AI and technology changing the real estate market in the next couple of years or a couple of months?
Yeah,
you know, they're moving fast.
Well, I mean, you know, I guess the problem is, you know, I'm 50 this year, right? So, you know, computers came out when I was younger, and then, you know, then they're in their office. I think as I'm getting more involved in stuff, you know, the time it takes you to learn something is shrinking. The product life cycle of something is going from, you know, maybe if you're learning. I saw something the other day, but, you know, learning to type for the first time, you know, they used to have a program, Mavis Beacon, to
I remember that. I had it.
You know, and you're sort of there for a bit. You know, now everyone can type pretty fast because you learn in schools, but I mean, you know, that was kind of rolling out, and people would get used to be, you know, one time, you know, press. You know, now on a phone, it's all automatic, so quick. AI, you know, I mean, the person who runs the video came out and said, you know, the other day, you know, AI won't take your job. somebody working with AI will take.
Yes, I believe that too.
I think he's being a bit generous because I think AI will take your job as well. Real estate as well. Real estate, insurance, finance, the three, if you're not involved in AI at the moment to make sure operations and expansion are done cost effectively, properly, you might as well quit now. So I've been, I know you have as well, but working a lot with some, again, mentoring, who's helped me in business, but Dave Hadjij, you've got Colin Blackwell, a few others that have worked in AI that I've given their time, to go through stuff for me, to educate me, because if I'm not educated up to speed, I don't have the tools to help people. So, real estate, AI wise, you've got, at the basic level, you've got Google Earth, Google Street View, Google Maps. You're only going to have one away, and you're going to market your house yourself.
That's right.
So where's the value add, and how do you deliver a better service proposition to people? If it's taking me, if I'm pitching work for you and then working out how to build that, if it's taking me 2 days to send you meeting minutes after the meeting, or a week to send you my pitch document, if somebody else is going to do it in half an hour, and they're going to do it, and they're going to have more conversation with the client, and the client's going to respect them. So that is happening.
Yeah.
There's no getting away from it.
How did the real estate agent in Portugal sell $1 million or something that was, on the news here? Did you see that?
I did see that. Yeah. I don't know. I'm working it out.
Yeah. I still was like, okay.
Yeah. Actually, that I'm always. They did sell it through AI. They did sell, from what I can understand. I'm obviously not familiar with it, the ins and outs of the company, but they worked on a numbers game. They had it was off plan sales, and so it's not raising money, and also they're one of the biggest operators in that space, in that area, which is off the selling properties to expats. I think I'm always a bit conscious with looking at comparisons of what people are up to. There are a lot of, for example, the statistics office in Vietnam, yes, you can look at it, but really a good consultant would see that maybe, there's a different element of the truth. People that, produce projects in Vietnam and they go, well, we sold out in a day. They sold out a phase in a day, or they sold it to the people in their company for a bit less, or, they sold it to, there's ways that you can spin sales, and make sure that it looks like, it's not just a case where there are some smart people in the industry, that you can come and chat to, that can tell you the best ways to get the media out there, that people think that that's a desirable product to either buy. When you're selling, as you know more than I do, when you're selling luxury items that people are buying, they're not just buying, they're buying a whole package with that, and the way that they buy is differently than mass market sales. So we do both, of course. We advise people on their sales strategies and things like that, or leasing strategies.
One of your or multiple of your loved ones going to watch this in 20 years. What do you have that you can say to them that how they can unlock their own potential, or how can they grow?
Multiple of my loved ones. You stumped me at that. So,
you're not just one person.
You sure?
People that love you right now.
Yeah, sure. Appreciate that. How do you unlock your potential? I just think, communicate and ask questions to those around you, and utilize, it's a very straight talking about AI and how that's going to change. People are talking about glasses that you can, look at stuff and but everybody has all the minds now on their phone, has the ability and access to like the whole history of people and population and data. All the way that they're looking at education in schools right now, they now deliver, in Harvard's case, they deliver a lot of the courses for free. It costs you now to take the exam because, everyone has access to it, or people are saying that I'm going to be a solo solopreneur is what I heard these days, building up companies where I don't need to work with people or kind of looking at them. I think there's lots of people who are waiting for the right time for things to fix in line. And then, maybe tomorrow I will go to the gym. Maybe tomorrow I will learn Vietnamese, or maybe, so my thing would just be utilize and ask the question, even if it's, there's a Vietnamese, again, like I said, the jump speak where, it's communicating with you in AI, you're talking to it in AI, there's less embarrassment to it. You can learn faster, rather than sort of hiring. So, and it costs money, obviously, but, I don't work for them, but my point being that I think utilizing the people and the products that are around you and have an inquisitive, open mind.
Yeah.
That would be my advice.
That's awesome. All right, David, thanks for coming in and having a chat.
But that was great. Thank you very much. That was really nice. I appreciate the time.
Hey, no problem. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about that I didn't bring up?
No, I just appreciate the time. It's always good. I love, maybe I'm the person, the learner or whatever it is, because I do watch your show. I do like the key points that you make on your message. It's good to constantly be up to speed and kind of go through stuff. So yeah, I appreciate it. I appreciate the content, and I appreciate, asking me to be here.
Yeah, right on. No, I really enjoyed it. I mean, my whole purpose is try to help other people, and I know that you're somebody that can help. So yeah, thanks again. No, appreciate it, brother.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for the time.
You bet, man.
Yeah, great.
Hey, thank you very much for tuning in today with another episode of the Unlock Potential podcast. Today, I'm excited to introduce a true visionary leader who has made remarkable impact in Southeast Asia's real estate market. David Jackson is the principal and CEO of Avison, Vietnam, and Cambodia, bringing years of leadership experience in one of the world's most dynamic and fastest growing markets. From his early career in UK to building and leading successful real estate ventures across Vietnam and Cambodia, David's journey is one of bold decisions, cultural adaptability, and a relentless pursuit of growth. In this conversation, we dive into leadership lessons, the evolving real estate landscape in Southeast Asia, and how David continues to unlock the potential of his teams and the markets he serves. Let's get started. Better? All right, okay. Here we go. Outro. 3, 2, 1. That wraps up okay, no, it's okay. That wraps up this insightful conversation with David Jackson. His journey is a powerful reminder that courage, adaptability, and a focus on making a meaningful difference can lead to extraordinary success. If today's episode inspired you, share it with someone who is ready to take their own bold leap. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss out on more leadership lessons and stories of personal growth. Until next time, keep unlocking your potential and helping others do the same.